Greetings and peace, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Tonight, I have the honor, privilege, and pleasure of welcoming back my brother Matt Douglas after a long time of the Fatimiyya Sufi order back to the podcast. And tonight, brother Matt will discuss, and I will discuss along with him, our recent travel experiences and what we learned in that experience, amongst other things that we will talk about. So, without further ado, Nur alaikum and welcome to our brother Matt.
Thank you. Alaikum Nur Salman. Glad to be back. Um, yeah, so I had, because both of us have traveled recently. I mean, more or less live in Thailand now. And of course, sometimes going back to the States, and you being originally from Pakistan, now an American citizen, will still travel back to your motherland. And one thing we've been talking a lot for the audience. I don't know. We've been talking personally about our travel experience because a lot of the connector flights now are through the Middle East, especially the smaller Middle Eastern countries such as the Emirates, Qatar, etc. Um, And so, there's things we've noticed with this. Um, I'm actually going to be headed to the Emirates on the 14th for a little bit. So hopefully I'll get to maybe do a follow up where some of the speculation and questions that we come up with, given our observations, can have more light shed upon them.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, brother Matt. And with me recently using Qatar Airways to travel from here to the U.S. to Pakistan, I did experience how majority of these Arab countries are now focusing on tourism and majorly advertising for people to come and patronize their lands, their businesses, their facilities. They're seeking employees, students. What I saw mainly, like here from the Philadelphia area, they have a mix of Americans and people that are like Germans, like European Americans, you could say, like Germans that are living in or working in the U.S. So I saw a lot of that in Philadelphia when I was dealing with Qatar and transitioning. When I got to the airplane, you're dealing with mostly Indians and Filipinos. So I did not run into one Arab while I was in Qatar Airways, whether it was traveling in the plane, the stewards, the hostesses. When I got to the airport, it was all Indians and Filipinos that were working there. I didn't see any Arabs, but in their advertisements, they advertise a lot of the Arab culture in terms of Qatar is a safe country and things like that. That's all I was getting left and right while I was sitting in the plane. They were advertising their food, their culture, and things like that, and how they were able to host the World Cup in 2022 because I had went to Pakistan in November of 2022 while the World Cup was going on. So I was able to see a lot of that, how in a subtle manner, how a lot of these airlines are like advertising so much in their countries, especially these small Gulf Middle Eastern countries, and what is like really the motive behind that in terms of 10 to 20 years from now. And I know you've also seen something like that too in your travels.
Oh, definitely. Although I have a hard time calling it subtle. Yeah. I mean, for me, because I've noticed this a lot. I had actually flown Qatar back to the States in 2021, and then I had flown them just um, from Kuala Lumpur to Istanbul just about 2 months ago. And granted, so this is before and after the World Cup. And, of course, now they get the new airport, which I think Well, it's still the same. It's still Hamad International, but totally new terminal, and still somewhat being built, but for the most part done. There's just certain areas you gotta walk a little extra because some of the bridges aren't quite, the internal bridges aren't quite done. But a lot spiffier, a lot snazzier. Airport, a lot more decor. I don't no complaints about that. Including large sculptures, things like that. Where I also noticed, and why I say it just isn't subtle at all, when I um, flew back to Thailand, I flew Etihad Airways, and which of course their hub is Abu Dhabi, and I noticed a flight pattern, you might say, that I had never seen before. And that's anyone who flies a lot, if you're paying attention, you know this. If you're not paying attention, you'll realize it when I say it. Um, After takeoff, it doesn't usually take much time for the pilot to start turning the plane to adjust course to whatever destination you're going to, because runways only have the plane take off in one specific direction. So the course adjustments are made initially just about a couple thousand feet up. However, upon descent, usually the major course adjustments are made well in advance so that your descent is pretty much a straight line or darn close to it for a good hour. That was not the case when I flew into Abu Dhabi. Um, And I mean, granted, the pilot was more than skilled enough to do what they did. Yet there was a 90-degree left turn course adjustment at only a couple thousand feet upon the descent. Um, so that the the last straight vector, if you will, was only 5-10 minutes at the most. And what I was actually in a window seat. I like the window seats. Um, and I do like looking at the scenery. Um, like I said, this was different because there was that 90-degree turn to the left. It's only about 5 or 10 minutes to go, a couple thousand feet up, and it was pretty much like the pilot was saying, "Check out the city," you know. Um, and I mean, it was perfectly safe. I thought it was just very, very different. So I didn't see that as necessarily subtle at all. Just yeah, we're making a special flight pattern so you can have a nice good look. Um, Not to mention that when you get, because the Abu Dhabi Airport International is also building a new terminal, and you can tell it's a new terminal because it's not only looks new, but there's no actual planes there right now. But it's got a roof that's kind of has like a rolling wave pattern as opposed to um the more boxy look that is more common among airport terminals, although certainly many airports are changing that. But the taxiing uh, to the terminal, you actually end at the taxiing pattern was quite a zigzag, so it was very obvious that The pilot was making sure both sides of the plane got to take a look at the new terminal. So, not to mention just the, advertisements before any in-flight movie and that sort of thing. And it's really obvious they're trying to draw on the tourists. And they, of course, which even if someone has no interest in going to those countries, it at least works out because, well, I think we've both gone through there because that's where the cheap flights were. And, so there were, the airlines are working with the governments to help boost the tourism.
Yeah, absolutely, brother Matt. And you pointed that out in a great manner. How, like, when you were flying, and how they were maneuvering, so you could see parts of the city, the skyline, see the terminal, and all of the advertisement that they're doing about shopping and dining and the culture and the tourism and the lifestyle. My question is, what's going on in these rich Arab Gulf states where all of them are promoting this aspect of safety and tourism and things like that towards non-Arabs in the Western world? Like, what is their goal behind that? Because I see a lot of these Arab leaders and countries, in my personal opinion, as still an extension of the Western Anglosphere and as proxies in some way.
Oh, I think that's I'll not disagree with your opinion there, and certainly I've been asking the same question, of course, and that's kind of a question. I'm hoping when I go there, I'll get at least some answers to. Obviously, we're not going to get full answers because, well, there never are full answers because things are so multi-layered. Um, but certainly, because the reputation in the West for a long time of these smaller Arab countries is, you know, where the rich guys from the bigger countries can go without the laws being so strict to get away with stuff. Now, very much to the credit of these countries, I'll say that they're certainly not promoting that angle, not to say that that's disappeared, but that they are trying, that at least what I get from the advertisements is they're really trying to promote it as a family friendly place. Um, and so that, and we've speculated on this, that it's with, you yourself talked about a lot of people um, flying through from the US to India along um, these routes.
Yeah,
And
what they're doing, brother Matt, just as a quick interjection, what Qatar Airways is doing is people that are traveling to Pakistan and India, when they're traveling from, let's say, Europe or England or America, they put everybody on the same flight. But when they get to Qatar, that's when the split happens. Is those that are going to India go off on their own separate route, while those that are going to Pakistan or other countries are going off on their own route. But collectively, from, let's say, one destination. So here from where I'm at, there were majority of the people on my flight were Indians, and it was just a couple people that were Pakistanis. But when we get to that Hamad International, that's when the split happens. But that's exactly what they're doing, is they're cramming everyone onto these flights.
well, I certainly on my first leg, because I was flying from Dulles to Hamad, then Hamad to Suvarnabhumi in Bangkok. And yeah, I'd say on the first leg, I mean, it's typical for there to be, you know, a hub's a hub, and that's somewhat the definition of it. But yeah, it was interesting. I'd say about, I mean, it's not like actually making a hard count, but yes, I would have estimated that about half the flight was Indian. Um, And with a big rise in Asia, first China, now India is trying to somewhat copy China. Obviously there's a rise of more people with money flying back and forth. So um, on the surface, that's being catered to. At the same time, though, them still being an extent, you mentioned there's still an extension of the West. And well, yeah, because what I noticed is, well, I shouldn't even say notice, I mean, it was just there. Um, but in addition to in Hamad International, uh, they were all the shops when I went to like buy a candy bar. By the way, the Camel's milk chocolate is really good. Not worth the price, but really good. Try the smaller bars, so you don't have to spend too much. But um, yeah. If you go to Dubai Airport, then you only get the big bar or the big huge bars for like the equivalent of like $45. You want to try the Camel's milk chocolate? They're only 8 for the small bars, which is still expensive for a candy bar. Let's face it, but it's good. Um, in Abu Dhabi, and what I noticed in the shops, or because I had about 5 hours to connect your weight, so of course I want to eat. Um, and what I notice is they'll always ask whether you want to pay in dirham or in dollars. Um, so are they still an extension of the West? Well, yeah, despite the fact that they're wanting to cater to a much more international audience. Or I shouldn't say audience, clientele. Um, so yeah, so on that level, yeah, there is still that very Western aspect, and that they want the dollar. Whereas I live in Thailand, which is a one of the um, highest tourism part of the GDP per capita in the world. And no, you don't pay in foreign currencies here. You pay in baht. So yeah, that the fact that they're still wanting the dollar, despite a growing international tourist business, is almost contradictory, you might say.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, brother Matt. And I have to point out one thing is that right now, with what's going on in Saudi Arabia, like they have a plan 2030 of Saudi Arabia, and they're building all of these futuristic cities and trying to attract Westerners into Saudi Arabia and these other Gulf states. Where and what the a lot of these rich Arabs and Arab leaders do, and I'm saying this as a Muslim American myself and somebody who is from that part of the world, so there is no bias or racism on my part. I'm just calling out a spade as a spade wherever I see it, regardless of race or religion. So a lot of these guys over there, they hold people liable for the smallest stuff. While when they come to the Western countries, what they were executing people over for or imprisoning people for in their countries, they're participating in the same acts with their money when they come to Europe, England, or America in the Western countries. So a lot of that hypocrisy has to be pointed out, and how now they're promoting the aspect of the West coming into those lands. So that's why I say a lot of these guys behind the scenes, it's like two sides of the same coin, and you're not really getting anything different. And what they do is they also exploit a lot of the people from the Philippines, India, Pakistan, people who are trying to find labor or trying to make a living. Because keep in mind, when I got on the Qatar Airways and going to Qatar, and all the way from Pakistan and back, I did not find one Arab who was working, whether it was in the airplane, whether it was at the airports. So I gotta put that out there too. So these people are loaded, and they ain't working, and there you have it.
Yeah, I mean, well, I've definitely noticed, you know, odd dynamics of of airport employees wherever you go. What one, which does speak to the sad inequality in the world. I remember the one time I had a connector flight. I forget the name of the airport, but the main one in Stockholm, Sweden. Half the airport staff was black, but pretty much no pass no passengers were whatsoever. And yeah, I noticed very few Arabs actually as staff. I won't say none, but slim. What I find, um, because you mentioned about the duality with the laws, and I'd mentioned that before as well. But like I said, they are the advertisements to bring in the tourists want to make it want to look like the most family friendly place possible. Now, as someone who lives in Thailand, you can have the adults only stuff and the family friendly stuff pretty much side by side, without it being without raising any kids' eyebrows, and keeping that. That's not really that hard to do. But what I found, where I find something rather insidious, is that now you do have a rise um, of more potential um, tourist dollars coming from various Asian countries. So they're catering to the family friendliness, and well, I don't want to say that it's pretty. People talk whether or not a culture is has family values, and frankly, every culture is about family. Every culture has family values. Unless it's the only there really isn't a culture that doesn't have family values, just like an anti-culture like capitalism is what's anti-family. But when you have these countries as outposts of the West, and putting up the image, it can very much be um it can allow for kind of like an intelligence front.
Yeah, absolutely, brother Matt. There are those aspects, and I think right now what's going on in the Middle East is a lot of that influence. Like there is that infighting going on within different nations, but also there is that fight between the East and the West. So recently, China made a peace deal with Iran and Saudi Arabia, and now they brought Syria to the table to restore their ties with the Arab world. And now their next aim is Palestine for some reason. So now we're going to see within the next 10 years that fight getting even stronger between the Western influence in terms of how they control the Arab leaders and what China is trying to do in terms of winning them over. So how do you see this going between this influence fight between the East and the West?
Well, in short, I'll say the East is winning slowly, and certainly it's causing the West to, pardon the phrase, shit their pants. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and there could potentially be a whole lot of chaos in the world if um the West decides they want to maintain rule even if over a rubble heap.
Yep.
So there's danger there. Um, I'd say much more so from the West. Um, Now, like say the Chinese strategy isn't necessarily to conquer so much as it is leave the West in the dust via development.
Yep.
Um, Now that's not to say that like China and India wanting to follow, though still lacking in comparison to China. That's all love and light by any stretch. Every country has their own motives, although I definitely don't see it anywhere near as bad as the colonialism that Europe and the States wreaked upon the world. So there are some silver linings. At the same time, nobody's above criticism. Everybody's often got their own motives, which I don't mind a nation being out for itself as long as they're not invading anybody, obviously.
Yes.
But the question is, are they really out for themselves? The question you have to ask of any nation is, are they out for themselves as a nation as a whole, or are they just out for the elites of their nation? And I don't think it's all or nothing with anybody. There's a spectrum, although you have to give an honest analysis of where everybody is along that spectrum.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And I think as time goes on, we will see this change. It's happening within our lifetime right now, where we're seeing that right now economically, even in the US, a lot of people really don't have no future here. Even if you do get a degree, if you are trying to do the right thing, even in the current situation, the laws and the system is made for the criminals. Even if you do, let's say somebody's messing with you and you try to report them and get justice and things like that, the system is not there to favor you. You get a degree, you work hard, you keep your nose clean and all that good stuff. When it's times to come find jobs, you can't find any job unless you know anyone. So America is deteriorating right now with the crime, lawlessness, unfairness as a third world country, which makes me think that there is that Eastern influence that is not only influencing this trade and investment in Arab countries, but a lot of European countries as well, such as some of the North countries where they have better health care, better education. I've been seeing a lot of videos recently on TikTok, and it talks about how you have a lot of people like single Americans or working Americans who are basically leaving the US for better places where the cost of living is cheaper. They have healthcare, education, and things like that, where the crime rate is lower, where criminals are actually held liable instead of being ignored. So, what do you see in terms of like, you know how like everyone flees to America for the American dream? What do you see now in terms of the future dream?
Well, I mean, the American dream was the American nightmare for the African and the Native American.
Yes.
Um, so I mean, the American dream is dead. Uh, I mean, really. Um, I mean, yeah, you can. There's still plenty of, because the cost of living is higher. Despite naturally, then the salaries have to be higher just for um people to have a start. So there are still, many people throughout the world who will go to the US to work, sometimes often, living collectively, a lot of workers or family members, bundling up in whatever property, house, apartment, whatever they rent this, to save money, um, and then take it back home, either sending it via whatever wiring means, or whether they're going to commute back or however. So that's still there, but it's not the idea of, the house with the white picket fence. Forget that. That's gone. Um, and whatever is the new dream of people. I think the world's still trying to figure that out. Um, I mean, obviously, there's still loads of capitalism, which more people are going to be very suspicious of and very cynical about, and rightfully so. Um, Now, there's definitely, I mean, being in Asia, there's genuine um hope for the future here because things are on the rise. What that looks like um varies from person to person, and there's still plenty, and I've talked about this in some of my other podcasts. There's still massive amounts of Western propaganda here. Um, which some people buy into and some people don't. Um, Now, I would personally hope that as the U.S. decays, that as Asia rises, they'll realize that, well, we might not want to go with any American model because look what happened. And if they do try to follow an American model, that is what in many ways will happen, maybe with a local flavor. Um, but I'd say if you follow it exactly, you're going to get the exact same result. So that's no, and obviously that ain't good. Now nations also may not be grabbing the wealth with as much military force, and that's a good thing because we don't want people dying. Um, but it's not to say there isn't going to be greed, and that's gonna need to be held in check. So there's definitely um, if the countries that are rising don't want to fall the way America's falling now, then don't rise in quite the same way. And that includes not just, I mean, I think, like China, for example, is, well, they're certainly building up their military, and I don't blame them. They're not going around invading people. There might be various other things that could be called imperialistic. Um, but obviously, it's not just that, but the kind of the mentalities that the toxic mentalities that form in capitalism, such as like the whole keeping up with the Joneses kind of mentality. I definitely think that has to be guarded against. Which is not to say people can't have nice things. I think everybody should be able to have nice things. That's the kind of world we want. But they should be things that genuinely uplift one, both with physical comforts and fulfillment, not just status symbols.
Yes, brother Matt, that's absolutely right. And it's interesting to see because in 2016, I took a macroeconomics course in college. It was a part of my business degree. And in that course, my professor was a retired U.S. Army military officer. He gave briefings at the
Come again,
Pentagon.
you said you tired U.S. Army.
Yes, do you hear me?
I do now, yeah.
Yeah, so in 2016, I took a course in my college with macroeconomics, which was a required course for my degree. And in that course, my professor was a retired U.S. Army military officer who also gave briefings at the Pentagon. This guy was very well educated, well traveled, and what he would say at that time, he would say that in 10 years from now, and this is in 2016, so he was saying by 2026, 2027, the world economic influence and the power of the world, how people always run to America for jobs and opportunities and better life, and all of that in between is going to shift to Asia and Southeast Asia as a whole. And how you're witnessing that too, and what you have seen in your travels and living experiences. And that is true. This is why maybe that's the reason why the Arabs are advertising their countries, other people are advertising their countries. All of this could be tied in together.
I definitely think so. Now, interestingly, because there's definitely, the backlash, Western propaganda. Um, like I was watching a special on on the rise of Dubai. Now, to some extent, they were talking about the exploitation, which usually when there is an economic rise, there's some of that behind in the world, sadly, with the various systems throughout the world. Yet at the same time, they're going to say that, oh, Dubai knows that this is short lived, that's about to fall apart, et cetera. And you got to be very skeptical of that when you see Qatar and even Abu Dhabi, which is another part of the Emirates, doing the exact same thing now. So, in terms of building up and catering to the tourism, obviously they wouldn't be doing that if they thought Dubai was just well timed and lucky. Obviously they see a market for this. Now, granted, like I said, there could be some prop up from the West on this to try and lure people as part of one of their schemes. Certainly, that's possible. And there's one thing I noticed it for the good, but of course there can be underhanded motives. One thing that I did like is when you see like in all these airport advertisements, what I like to call the wall advertisements, like the ones on the ramp to like the ads on the ramp to the planes and things like that. Is that there was much more diversity of models in the advertisements, um, including a surprising number of African models. That's good, of course, if the motive is to just take their money or more. Um, you know, capitalism has never been a good path to inclusion, even with surface tokenism. But at the same time, I mean, it's at least good to see, that it's not exclusively, catering to white people or even lighter skinned people, regardless of ethnicity.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And that's what I've been seeing a lot in terms of when I was in Qatar Airways and they were showing like the advertisement of their country in terms of the tourism, the food, the culture, swimming around in these places. It makes it seem like very, very welcoming. And in terms of like showing different peoples in the advertisement, you're right. It's about, I think, this global order that is being created now, and the Arabs have a hand in it also. And if you look at that picture, do you remember that picture that went viral with Donald Trump and the King of Saudi Arabia and all these people putting their hand on this globe-like figure?
Yeah. Oh, heck, The Simpsons even. I forget whether The Simpsons parodied it or even like semi predicted it, but yeah.
So all of these beings are like kind of tied in together. I know everyone's kind of pointing out to a lot of the Jewish controlled families that are running everything in terms of the world power, but the Arabs have a big hand in it also. And what are your thoughts on this, especially even after 9/11, how the bin Laden family was like flown right out like the next day privately and no one heard a peep about it. Even if we see in Hollywood, they kind of do a subtle reference in the John Wick franchise where they show you the guy running the whole underworld with some Arab in a Moroccan desert. So, what are your thoughts on all of this in terms of a lot of these rich Arab royals and how they're tied into the world and its condition that we see today?
Okay. Well, when you mention John Wick, the first thing I think of is, despite them being fairly entertaining movies, how just piss poor the fight choreography was, and like, let's not draw our guns till melee range. I'm like, what kind of crap is this? Um, but sorry, I guess that. But well, first I'll say that it's good that you know, in a sense, it's like the Arabs getting their just due for their historical contributions. I mean, shortly after Muhammad, the Arab world became the cradle of civilization. A lot of our, the basics for a lot of our sciences, flourished during that time. It led to, university, there was universities throughout the Muslim world. So I'm glad to see that, like you mentioned, John, with, you know, there being an Arab influence. Granted, the fact that so in a way that's good, but at the same time, the fact that the control they have is over an assassins guild. Well, um, there's certain when that's what their focus is. There's certainly a bit of a in a sense a bit of a diss there too, because there were so many healthy constructive things that the Muslim world brought. You wouldn't have had a renaissance in Europe without Islam. Even in things like the arts, and I mentioned this on there was a thread that Sheikh Wahid started, and I forget what it was, but even with uh, Islam's prohibition on images in the temple. Because here's Muhammad who comes to a bunch of desert nomads and turns them into this flourishing civilization. And what's interesting is here he says, "Okay, guys, no more pic." I know I'm saying this in a very kind of crude secular way. Basically says, "Okay, guys, no more pictures in the temple." Um, so what that did is it forced the decor to be patterns. And if you think of like mosaics are very common. If you think when you have not necessarily an artful mosaic, but even one that's just patterned, where you can see all these grout lines in these little tiles, you very quickly see how those parallel lines converge, towards the horizon. And, and if it wasn't for that, I don't think Leonardo would have ever developed, granted, probably someone else developed it, he gets the credit, developed perspective in painting, where you then, you then paint like it was a photograph where things in the background are smaller than in the foreground. So there are so many ways that Islam, which started, of course, in Arabia, transformed the world. And so, on some level, okay, great that they're now getting credit. But again, could John Wick have given? I know, because they go into, and what is it, like second or third movie, the breakdown of the word assassin and where it comes from, even thinking it's from the Arabic for a user of hash. And that's all fairly accurate, but there's a whole lot more. you know
Yes, my brother, that is absolutely right. And the Islamic Renaissance is the aspect of the golden age that brought Europe out of the dark ages when it was being suppressed by Roman Catholic suppression. And even Pope Sylvester II, he went to Spain and the universities there and put that knowledge into the trivium, what we see as modern day Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. A lot of that knowledge came from the Sufi lodges and the Sufi mystics of North Africa and the Middle East. How Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, the Sufi saint, was known as the Rose of Baghdad even before Rosicrucianism even existed. Christian Rosenkreutz was inducted into Sufism by the mystics of North Africa and the Middle East. So it has really contributed majorly to the world as we know it. And I myself have done that effort in terms of going around Masonic lodges and educating American Masons, a lot of them who had no idea about Islam, and the ignorance that was in a lot of their minds about what Islam was, and how thinking that uh, Muslims hated Freemasons and things like that, and showing that a lot of that knowledge is already there and it was passed on through these different societies. So I think we do owe the world that part in terms of showing how Islam has helped not only the Western world but so many initiatic paths and esoteric societies, and how even Leonardo da Vinci was able to appreciate that. And that is the ultimate truth. Is what we're seeing is at at one time the world, a lot of the world's influence was in the East, and for a certain time it came to the West with the British Empire and the French and the Americans, Pax Americana and Pax Britannica and all of that in between. But I think now the power of the world for the next century or two, possibly longer, is going back to the Eastern world, which includes North Africa, the Arab world, the Eastern world, China, Japan, Thailand, and all of that in between. Even recently, when I went to Pakistan, I saw how people over there that have money and are well educated have a much higher quality of life compared to your average American.
Oh, definitely. And when we say, because even though I mentioned before that there are still people who will go to the U.S. for the cash, let's also keep in mind that uh, cash is not a reflection of quality of life. It's what you can buy with the cash. And if things are more expensive, then the cash is that much less of a determinant. Um, One thing that's really interesting, about where I live in Thailand is Thailand still has, unlike the US, a whole ton of family farms. And that certainly allowed them to weather, despite the fact that on the cash level, they got hit very hard, due to COVID, because it, crimped the tourism industry. I hate to use the word tourism industry because they're not exactly building tourism in a factory, you know.
Yes.
Um, but that's what they call it. We need new terms. Um, but it's like when they talk about the service industry, it's like, no, that's kind of a contradiction. Um, but there are a lot of family farms, mainly thanks to the previous king Rama IX, who basically did massive land grants, giving a whole lot of Thais farmland. It's just, and granted, that doesn't make everything perfect, because not everybody wants to have to be a farmer, but there's certainly a um level of social security and food, the ability to feed yourself when you have your own farmland. So, yeah, yes, during the pandemic, where people certainly complained that there weren't other ways to earn cash, but they at least survived, food wise. And um, that's certainly better than I can say about the US, that once had a lot of family farms, and most of them have been gobbled up by, big ag, through predatory loans.
Yep. That's exactly right. And see, that's what I noticed here is in the US, like you truly don't own anything, even if you spent your whole life working hard, paying off a home, and one day you get elderly, sick, you cannot pay the property taxes anymore. And in a second, they'll come and put a lien on your home, the local municipality or government, and they'll take your home. I've seen that with so many elderly who had retired. They spent their whole lives paying off their homes to have their dream. And once they could no longer sustain the taxes, their homes were taken away from them. So you don't really own anything here, whether it's your vehicles, your homes, unless you have some kind of a special privilege or you're tax exempt, or if you own the land. But that's like very few in terms of your majority Americans who are just struggling enough to survive. What I've seen in Pakistan and in other parts of the world, once you buy something, it's yours. Like you don't, they're not going to come and confiscate your property if you don't pay a property tax or things like that. That kind of concept does not exist. So there is a major difference that I've seen in terms of true ownership of what you really have in terms of the East and the West.
Well, I definitely think we have to, as a society, reevaluate what ownership means.
Yes.
Um, and we have this in the Bayan, where there's a prohibition on commerce in the four elements, which would, of course, mean to an extent real estate, and the buying and selling of land. Like, okay, and if to say the Native Americans, okay, you didn't buy and sell land, just collectively agreed upon, okay, you build here, you build here, you build here, which, of course, well, that's one aspect of life you don't really have to worry about in terms of how are you going to buy your land. I mean, that when you start thinking about it, I mean, that concept is pretty darn silly. But it wasn't because a family didn't have land that was theirs and they were safe on their own land or anything. I mean, certainly they did. They just didn't, they just didn't have this, stupid system and game of buying and selling it. Um, and if we all did that, then we could, it would be a lot easier on most people. And certainly you see that in places where there has been land reform. Does it solve everything? No. Like I said, a lot of Thai have farms and want to be more than farmers. Okay, and that's fine, but it's at least a solid base. Um, which in some places you don't have, and it's funny because I had, I had it's almost laughable because I had so many people telling me when I wanted to first, go overseas and maybe realize, oh, okay, like, oh, be careful because we've got property protection here in the U.S. There, they can just take your home, and when in fact it's in many ways it's the complete opposite. Um, So, and as there's definitely needs to be a more collective understanding to how we work with land, and yet at the same time, I don't think that threatens individual security in the way we think, quote unquote, private property upholds it.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And that's why I've been seeing a lot of, in terms of like that advertisement of what a lot of these rich Arab Gulf states are doing as part of the Eastern sphere. What they're doing is they're recruiting a lot of talented and good manpower, both men and women from European and Western countries, in terms of teachers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and they have these international schools and colleges and hospitals and all of that in between. And I've noticed that they're recruiting all of these different peoples to kind of bolster their own homes and their countries. Have you seen anything like that in Thailand as well, where they're seeking exterior talent or anything like that in your travels in
Well,
Asia?
well, what you got to understand about Thailand is that Thais are very open-minded folks, and they've been, oh, and for over a century, they've been, importing, so to speak. Um, if you've seen, and it's a bad movie, okay, in terms of doing justice to Thailand, but what grains of historical truth are there? If you've seen The King and I, which is about King Mongkut Ramapur, and at the end, is when his son Ramaphat Chulalongkorn takes over. Um, they were very much about bringing in um, stuff from the rest of the world, which at the time a lot of it was from the West because sadly it was because the West got rich at the expense of everybody else. But they had the mentality of go out into the world and see what's good, bring back the good stuff. Um, for example, Ramaphosa Chulalongkorn brought um, the trains. Okay, if you go to any train station in Thailand, you will see a picture of Chulalongkorn because he said, "Okay, I'm bringing some trains for Thailand. We could use some trains." Um, so even the modern new train stations have his picture up just as a tribute to the one who brought the trains to Thailand. So that's always been here. Now, where the influence is coming varies. I mean, yeah, there's still a whole ton of Western propaganda here that sadly some people buy. Um, that really doesn't um, show the rampant inequality in the West. But it's not exclusively where Thais are getting their influences from is not exclusively Western. When I was a teacher and when I asked kids, it's like I like as a broad question, ask the students, okay, if you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go? And the two biggest answers were Japan and Korea. Not granted, sometimes it's for like, in Korea it might be for K-pop. It's usually for K-pop, and I'll admit I'm not a K-pop fan. Sorry. At least most of it, like the stuff that reminds me of like all the boy band crap. I'm just sorry, just not my thing. But it's at least shown that there's, there is, how the Thais do like to take in things from wherever if they like it. Um, so on that level, they're pretty open folks. Pretty much always have been. Yet at the same time, those who, the visionary leaders who brought in what we might call modernization of Thailand were also very much aware of the threat of being overrun. And Thailand was the one Southeast Asian nation that was never colonized. So at the same time, there was a preparation there. Um,
That is so true, brother Matt, in terms of the Thai people, because one time when I visited London, I went to a really nice Thai restaurant, and they have a nice Thai community in London and the UK as a whole. And they were very nice, very welcoming people, and their food was great. And it's amazing to see their diaspora all over the world and how they actually have imported those values all over. So they've done more importing than ever.
True. Now, at the same time, when you mention it, I mean, yeah, there is a diaspora, but one thing that is interesting is I'd say the diaspora among Thai is a lot smaller than, various other Asian nationalities. And I mean, it's very, there's like in LA, there's like a very small few blocks that are, sometimes called Thai Town, but you don't see these sprawling neighborhoods of various Asian ethnicities. You don't, you really, the way you see Chinatowns, the way you see little Tokyos, little Souls, little Saigons, as they call them, even if
Yeah.
it's not called Ho Chi Minh City. Um, you see a lot less Thai diaspora, and mainly when they're the country that wasn't colonized, well, folks are less likely to leave.
Yeah, that is so true, my brother. That is so true, and we see that in Thailand, and I believe Ethiopia is another place that has never ever been colonized.
Yes, that's true. I know. I mean, just like with Thailand, folks tried. The British and the French certainly tried, and the Thais played them off against each other. Um, there were definitely when there was not that there hasn't always been when you had the massive scramble for Africa, everybody wanting their piece. When you had the Berlin Conference where Europe tried to divide it up, I mean, there were definitely nations that went after Ethiopia. I know Italy did. I'm pretty sure Britain did. Just although that's kind of because Britain went after everywhere. Um, but again, Ethiopia managed to you know stay independent, and good for them. Um, but I mean, there's certainly with the modern, you very much can take stuff from elsewhere, see the good, and at the same time remain sovereign and independent. And nations like Thailand and Ethiopia have done that. Of course, at the same time, you have to keep in mind that the West does put a massive propaganda effort into muddying these waters.
That is so true, brother. And I think now what we see in the post Elizabeth, post COVID, and post Brexit England or the United Kingdom, now we have King Charles III. A lot of people say that he has a favorable view towards Islam and the Muslims and the Eastern world. Now, do you see anything changing in the global world politics now that he's taken over the rule of the monarchy and the commonwealths?
Well, hmm. I mean, his when you say he's more favorable to Islam, I mean, I'd take that with a great grain of salt, seeing as how, for example, it was the Brits who basically put the House of Saud in power. So, and obviously now that Saudi is realizing that with the rise of Asia, that maybe they don't have to kiss up to the West. Well, obviously, it's going to make Charlie want to kiss up some more to them. Doyle, but
Well,
certainly, seeing as how his uh, late ex-wife was engaged to a Muslim, um, I'll question whether he really has a favorable view of it.
well, people have speculated that, and this is just speculation from what I've heard from the different opinions that I've seen, is that he has a close relation with the Naqshbandi Sufi order, and he has met them several times, the leaders of the Naqshbandi Sufi order, and a lot of them are anti-Wahhabi. So I would be interested to see that is basically the decline of Western influence over Islamic lands going to happen under his reign. And while we're seeing this, all of this tourism being promoted, how do you really see this now that Elizabeth is gone and now there's a new guy in charge, and who knows what he's really thinking and what he's going to do in terms of influencing world politics. And from the different opinions that I gathered.
Well, I don't trust the House of Windsor or any other British royal whatsoever. Because ultimately, I mean, even though they're remnants of feudalism, I mean, they've become capitalists. You had mentioned like Jewish influence. Um, and of course, that while there are some rich Jewish families in the world that are influential and sometimes in a bad way, like say the Rothschilds.
Yeah.
Um, and granted, people as powerful and malign as they are, there are people who overdo that as a way to promote anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Um, which I should say are just anti-Judaism, as well, Arabs are Semitic peoples too. Um,
Absolutely, and that's why I say, to be fair, as a Muslim, you not only call them out, but you also call out the rich Arab Muslims who are responsible for a lot of the suffering in the Middle East and in these Muslim countries. Because if you look at the five pillars of Islam and you look at zakat, if even one or two of those families came together and divided their wealth equally, they would end poverty and suffering in so many places. But they continue to profit off of the suffering of their own people. So they are equally as liable. Well, and I teach that to the Islamic community, that you don't have to keep pointing your fingers at the Jews. Sometimes the enemy is in your own home.
well, yeah, but going back to Britain, I mean, the Windsors are, I don't know, Christian. What would that be? I mean, they'd be Anglican, essentially. Um, where basically they decided, okay, the British monarchy is the head of the church. Um, but the thing is, I mean, it's hard to know the real stats on it, but it's thought among many the Windsors are the richest family in the world by far. Um, even far richer than the Rothschilds. It's just that the crown put so much of its wealth in dummy uh, that that of course the crown controls, but behind the scenes, um, that in terms of could they take care of their own people a little better by sharing some of it? Oh yes, they could. If if anything, the dummy corporations can not only hide the wealth they're amassing, but um, allow for the anti-Semitism, to point the finger exclusively at Jewish families who run the banking, and which is not exclusively Jewish either. Um, but it goes back to the point of this hoarding of wealth. That that needs to come to an some way or another.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And brother Matt, this has been such an educational and informative podcast. And yeah, please discuss if there's anything that I have failed to ask you in terms of the current things that we have discussed so far in this podcast.
Well, not really. I mean, these are history, politics, society. It's not it's not simple. It's complex. It's multifaceted, multi-layered. Um, and while there's certainly good and evil in the world, it's rarely black and white. Um, so there's even though we're kind of wrapping up, these things go on. Like I say, I'm about to travel to this area, so maybe I'll see something that's very revelatory, and I can come back for a later podcast and say, "Hey, here's what I found out. Here's what I saw on the ground." And okay, all our these speculations were accurate, but these weren't. And okay, what's this mean in the overall picture? So,
I think that would be a great idea, my brother, and we will do that in the future when you do return. So right now we're in the month of May, so we will plan something like that for the month of June coming up. For those that are listening, in terms of what Brother Matt Douglas has experienced in his travels and how it's the things that we have speculated and pointed out in our views and opinions. What is true? What is not true? And where is this world going in the future? So, thank you again, Brother Matt Douglas, for your thoughts, for your wisdom. And this is part 9 of our series of dialogues and conversations. And my brother, I thank you always. And until we meet again,
all right, sounds good. Norlakum.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.